Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Cris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Welcome into First Things First. I'm Sarah Kunstock in for Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer, Cris Carter. That's Nick Wright.
Good to see you, Sarah. You look lovely. I like that color.
I was
like
thinking
that
about you two. Those are sharp suits.
I don't know if it shows up on TV, but there's a little bit of Viking purple pinstriping in that. It's one of your my favorite suits of yours, CC.
Yeah, my high school colors were purple, too.
High school?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Oh, when you flip up, we could see.
Oh, on the
Nice.
line. There you go. Good-looking suit, brother. Good to see you this morning.
Let's give the people what they want.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Looking fresh? Let's get to it. The Kawhi Leonard saga has taken another turn. He's reportedly been in New York during the All-Star break seeking a second opinion on his injured quad. This, despite being medically cleared to return. Greg Popovich was asked about the whole situation. Take a listen.
We only have X number of games left in the season, and he's still not ready to go. And, if by some chance he is, it's going to be pretty late into the season, and it's going to be a tough decision, how late you bring somebody back. So that's why I'm just trying to be honest and logical. I'll be surprised if he gets back this year.
Wow.
Whew. Nick, how bad have things gotten between Kawhi and the Spurs?
Well, as Cris has taught me, it's very important to listen to the exact words these guys are saying. Sometimes we just throw away the press conferences, it's coach speak, whatever it is. I want to read the exact quote you just heard part of it. It's going to be a pretty tough decision how late to bring somebody back. So what he is saying there is, it is not simply, will Kawhi say himself, I'm ready to go. But there's a date Greg Popovich has in mind that if he is not ready to go by this date, he's not coming back even if he wants to. And that is jarring information for a top 8 player in this league, for a guy who had a lot of MVP buzz, and for a team. It's not like the Spurs, well, we're in 12th place, we're not going to make the playoffs, maybe we just shut them down. They're the 3 seed right now. Right now there are 5 teams in the league overall with a better record than them. With a healthy Kawhi Leonard, they are a true championship contender. Maybe not top tier, but certainly the top of the second tier. And then you read the great reporting from Adrian Wojnarowski, where he says in his lead, Kawhi Leonard bears the burden of determining when he's prepared to play again. So I don't think it is reaching. I don't think it is hard, logical math to say. What Greg Popovich is saying is our doctors have cleared you. You have now done something that is very atypical for any Spur. You've left our cocoon to go to New York to get a second opinion. It is about when you clear yourself. And this is, to me, Greg Popovich telling Kawhi Leonard through the media, listen, if you think the idea is, because he's been reportedly a little disgruntled in San Antonio, if the plan is with a week left in the season to say, I'm good to go for the playoffs, you might not be able to do that. And that is very different than this entire saga, CC, has been very different than anything I'm used to seeing out of that organization.
Right. Pop said a few things in the interview, one being that Kawhi has been cleared, but if he continues to not play, well, he said also he's not ready. He's not ready. He's been cleared, but he's not ready. It means Kawhi's not ready in his mind to resume normal basketball activity. He also revealed that if it continues on, there is a drop-dead date that Kawhi will lose the option where he's in control, and I'm going to pull the plug on the season. The other thing that the irony to it was they were in a similar situation like this when David Robinson got hurt. It's not as if they tanked. He was just hurt, and they end up getting Tim Duncan, which changed the franchise. It's not one of those kind of situations. If they were the 12th seed or something like that, we could see something like this happening. The medical staff in San Antonio has proven itself over years to be one of the best in the business, and their overall approach has been one of the most conservative. When they have guys coming back, they have done a great job of, you know something, we will miss on the side, on the precautionary side, and hold the player out. Also, as far as Pop was the first coach to start resting players. That's why they had to change the NBA season, because Pop has always been just ahead of the norm in the league. So I think this to be a tall tale sign. I believe it's also one of those signs that eventually you wake up in the morning and you read it's a divorce. This couple, man, they lived next door to us. They did look like they were happy. Yeah, they end up splitting. I believe these are the types of things that we could see moving forward. And I believe that this press conference is just an ongoing thing that eventually this is going to end in a bad way.
The 1 year early in his career that Tim Duncan missed significant time, he had a meniscus injury in his knee. And Greg Popovich made it, they had already won a championship with Duncan, and people were curious as to why Duncan wasn't going to come back at the tail end of the season for the playoffs. And Popovich, he was asked about defending the title or winning a second title, and he said, very intelligently as it turned out, we're not worried about winning one more title with Tim Duncan. We want to have a number of titles with Tim Duncan. They were cautious with his knee. They did not clear him. And they ended up that was the worst year in the playoffs as far as in the Duncan era early on. They ended up winning 4 more titles. The key is they've cleared Kawhi. And it's not a knee. It's a quadricep injury. So it's less, tell me if I'm out of bounds here, you have less concern about doing long-term career damage when it's a muscle, when it's a quadricep tendon, than if it was, we're worried if his knee's going to give out. If it was something like that. It is, when you add to that what was the reporting earlier, which was earlier this year, kind of out of nowhere.
Yes.
Kawhi Leonard's not happy. You add to that LaMarcus Aldridge went to the team this summer and said, trade me.
Yes.
There is a lot of drama in San Antonio, the likes of which we are not used to.
And now it's changing because, to your point about them being a cautious organization, back on January 13th, Kawhi tried to come back. He played a couple games. They shut him back down on January 13th. And that was still the dialogue, that his rehab, we want to spend a little more time with rehab. It's not progressing as we want it to. So we're going to have him shut down, take a step back, and see how that goes. Now it's very different. It's not. There was nothing in Greg Popovich saying that we're being cautious.
Right now we're talking about the injury. They are being cautious. But if the athlete is not comfortable, it's hard to put the athlete on the court, and especially when he has control. What does Kawhi gain by playing, right? If he's not healthy, if he doesn't. Now, it's an odd injury as far as a quad. That's why I know Kawhi. I know the people who handle Kawhi. So I know this is not something fictitious. Like, I believe there is something there, but also I believe that Kawhi is not happy in San Antonio. People think, well, San Antonio is a great place. I believe Kawhi is worried about not being able to get potential free agents. When people were looking to go places, they don't look to San Antonio. Yeah, they got LaMarcus Aldridge, but he wasn't one of the top free agents. They had to settle on him, and he wanted out of San Antonio this offseason. So for me, I believe there's something that will come about as far as his shoe deal. He's with Brand Jordan now, and as we get more and more information, I think we're going to find out that he's disgruntled or he's not happy with that contract, because he's one of the lowest paid superstars from a shoe deal. So is he looking to get out of San Antonio, get to a bigger market, get with another shoe company? Like, I believe all those things are on the board.
And and you look at the guys who would be considered the top 6 players in the league by most people. LeBron has an enormous shoe deal. Everyone knows what LeBron's shoes are. KD famously has shoes with words on them. He's got his controversy surrounding his shoes. Steph has the Under Armour deal. Whether people like those Under Armour shoes or not, it's an enormously lucrative deal. Russ. I was just down 125th Street in Manhattan, where they used to have, at this House of Hoops store, an entire wall of Jordan display. It is now the new Russ shoe. Why not? His newest shoe. So there's that. And then the 5th player that I'm forgetting on the list is Kawhi Leonard. Pardon me. Kawhi Leonard. James Harden. He has an enormous deal with Adidas. And then there's Kawhi, who is in that group of players.
How much money does Harden make with Adidas?
He got a $200 million shoe deal.
And I think approximately Kawhi makes about $2.5 million with Jordan Brand.
Think about that. James Harden is making upwards of $30 million a year from Adidas. Kawhi Leonard, who a lot of people, I don't live in this world, this camp, but a lot of people do. A lot of people think Kawhi is better than Harden. They're certainly very close to each other.
Yes.
To have, what's that, 8% of what Harden has? Like, that would rub people the wrong way. We do a weird thing. It's the same thing people did. It reminds me of Marvin Harrison. People assign Marvin Harrison character traits based on one thing. He's quiet, doesn't celebrate, hands the ball to the ref. People assigned Kawhi Leonard. You had who he was in your head. And I'm not saying who he is or who he isn't, but we made him out to be someone very specific because he's quiet, because he's not demonstrative. And people are like, oh, why would Kawhi Leonard care about shoe money? Because everybody cares about shoe money. Because everybody cares about money. And so it's just, when you have all that bubbling up, and then you have, again, I think Greg Popovich sending a warning to Kawhi Leonard. Listen, if you're not back in the next few weeks, you're not back. That's very interesting for a team that was going to be a dark horse contender.
NBA Commissioner Adam Silver caused a lot of buzz this past week. He said he's open to changing the NBA's playoff format to seed the top 16 teams regardless of conference. While a lot of people have been excited about the possible changes, LeBron James seems a bit hesitant. Take a listen.
I think our league has been built the right way as far as when it comes to the postseason. There's been dominant conferences throughout time. It's cool to mess around with an all-star game. You know, we prove that you can do that, but let's not get too crazy about the playoffs.
CC, what's your reaction to LeBron's comments?
The man's a smart guy. Probably not as smart collectively as the guy across from me, but common sense. All right, they've been tinkering with the NBA, with the schedule. But let's not get carried away. Let's float some ideas out there, because what we don't want to see is bi-coastal series, multiple series that are bi-coastal. So if you happen to have the championship in the conference semifinals, and they're bi-coastal, and then you get to the finals, and it happens to be bi-coastal, you're talking about a rough month for NBA players trying to get a crown. I think right now, and especially with LeBron staying in the East, I don't believe it's a problem. If he decides to go West, I believe they have to make an adjustment. But I just believe the time zones and the amount of TVs in the Eastern time zone, you cannot take the chance with the ratings, because that's what it's really about. You got 60% of the television sets are in
East Coast.
So if you remove those, what kind of numbers will we be getting for the finals? Because if you have, let's say, Houston makes it, and Golden State, they make it to the finals. What are we going to do about all those television sets on the East Coast that are basketball fans that decide to zone out because of regionally? So we have to look at that. That's one thing I think the NBA, they will have a hard time overcoming, the sheer numbers, the lack of numbers in the West compared to what's in the East.
This is a moot point if LeBron stays in the Eastern Conference. If LeBron stays in the Eastern Conference, LeBron's been in the league 14 years, as he mentioned yesterday in that interview. So there have been 14 championships. The East has won 6, the West has won 8. So that's one away from being dead even.
Right.
And we do have some recency bias when we talk about, oh, the West has been so dominant. Oh, no, not really. I mean, the best player in the league the entire time, in the sport where it matters the most who the best player is, has been out East. And let's not forget, there were some potentially great teams that we would have remembered totally differently if they didn't have to go through LeBron James. How would we think of the 60-win Bulls with MVP Derrick Rose similarly to how we thought of the young Thunder that made the NBA Finals?
Yeah, that's
if
a good
they hadn't lost in the conference finals to LeBron. What about if the Celtics could have extended the run of the Big Three if LeBron hadn't ended it when he went to Miami? What if the Pistons, who had, by the way, beaten the Lakers in the finals, taken the Spurs to 7, what if they had kept going if LeBron hadn't ended that run when he was in Cleveland? Like the first time around, there have been, and that's not even mentioning a 60-win Hawks team with 4 All-Stars that just got dispatched easily by LeBron and the Cavs his second go-around with Cleveland. So I don't think up until recently we have had this major discrepancy. What has happened recently is this. You have a team on the greatest run in NBA history in one conference.
Right.
And then you also had the Spurs.
On the back end.
On the back end, all of a sudden reinventing themselves. And then some teams trying to climb up there. The Thunder before KD left. The Rockets right now. So it felt like it was this giant discrepancy. But the only reason it hasn't been a giant discrepancy is because you have had a legitimate contender in the East for the last 8 years because of LeBron. If he does go out west, CC, I get what you're saying about the TV deals, but what you don't want is it to feel like every year the NBA Finals is the Western Conference Finals. You don't want that. Now, I don't know what you do about the bi-coastal part, about the travel. If to speak to your point, if all of a sudden you have in the conference or in the semifinals the Raptors playing the Warriors, and then you also have the Celtics playing the Lakers if they get better, and that's the semifinals, and in the finals you have another back and forth. That could be a problem, and the TV money is a big thing as well. I understand that. But from a competitive balance standpoint, I don't think it's had a big discrepancy up to this point. If LeBron were to go out west, that could happen.
How much influence does LeBron's opinion have at this point?
I think his opinion is just like anything else. He's the best player in the world, and if he says something that has some type of credence, I'm sure. Look where Adam Silver in the league is. Look at the relationship that we talk about between what they're doing at NBA and the Players Association. So we know the NBA listens to its players. I mean, they've already addressed the referee-player issue that if we were in any other league, it would take at least an offseason and all these owners' meetings to be able to bring it up before we heard about it. So the NBA has been very, very progressive. They listen to their players, and we know that they listen to the best player in the world, and LeBron.
The other thing that this would happen is there are already the NBA. Some people think it's a strength, some people think it's a weakness. But one thing we know about the NBA, it's the league with the fewest upsets in the playoffs. Like, there are shockers in other sports. If you further stack the playoffs fairly, if you will, it's even less likely that you're going to have a 2011 Mavericks situation where a team does kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere because Dirk was on the team, but a team have a, wow, how did that team go win the title? Would have been, I guess, the 04 Pistons. That, those situations would be fewer and more far between. I don't know if the league necessarily wants that. What I know they don't want is for all 8 of the best 8 players in the league to be in one conference and in one side of the bracket come the playoffs, and that's what they're trying to adjust for.
Right, and I think they've gotten ahead of the cavalry by even approaching the conversation, because now if LeBron was to go to the West, they've already started the conversation that it would be a lot easier to make that type of change or that type of adjustment. So, but LeBron, he does have weight in everything. And, of course, his decision is going to be paramount as far as what the decision will be.
But the other thing, and this is why when LeBron says it's cyclical, we do have to keep in mind, if we're talking about the next generation of great players, what conference is Giannis in? What conference is Joel Embiid in? What conference is Ben Simmons in?
Yes.
In Kyrie, and I know he's this generation, but he's one of the younger great players in this league. Kristaps Porzingis, when he comes back, all of those guys are out east. The West is top-heavy, but it's not a bunch of great, aside from what they have in Minnesota, it's not a bunch of great young teams. It's a bunch of really good veteran teams. So it could fix itself, especially depending on what LeBron does.
Do you think that this had any indication on the feelings of LeBron with what he's going to do in his decision about what he does?
So I think a lot of people are going to read this and say, oh, LeBron knows he's staying out east. I still believe what I've believed all year. LeBron does not know where he's going to play next year. I think LeBron is a historian and a student of the game. And when he talks about what it would do to the record books, his recall for championships from before he was born is elite. Like, I do think he cares about the record books in the history of the game. I don't think this is about where he's going to be playing next year.
Right, and rechanging the seeding is a little overreaction right now to LeBron potentially going to the West, because 3 of the 4 teams potentially he would go to or out west. So you do have to look at it before he makes that decision.
We're sticking with the West, and this season has been a bit different for the Warriors, at least by their golden standards. They're already 1 loss shy from their most under Steve Kerr in an entire season, and they're behind the Rockets in the West. However, the team isn't sweating the #1 seed. Draymond and KD both reportedly say they haven't even talked about it, and they're not looking at the standings. CC, how important is the #1 seed for the Warriors?
It's important. The reason why is because, we're able to get a level set at the All-Star break. One team has 25 games, the other team has 24 games. We're basically tied, a half game apart. Now, this stretch drive to the end, who's a better basketball team? Like, who's going to play the better basketball? Or is Golden State just going to say, we'll wait to the playoffs and then we'll turn it on? We'll continue to compile all these technical fouls. So for me, it's not only the results on the court, but what's their body language, what's their chemistry, and how does their bench play down the stretch? Because I don't care who you are, and when you get to Game 7, unless it's LeBron playing against someone in the East, being Boston, because last year they decided to give up the 1 seed. But I don't believe Golden State wants to give up the 1 seed. I believe in their mind as an athlete, in case you don't get it, the right thing to say right now is the number 1 seed does not matter. But we know it is a huge advantage to getting it. So when you don't get it, if they started the playoffs and you said, okay, this was my goal to be the 1 seed, you're already starting out from a disappointed standpoint. So I believe it gives yourself a little cushion that if you don't get the 1 seed, you don't have to make excuses.
So that's interesting. So basically what you're saying is the downside to saying this is a must-win game and then you lose the game. What do you say after?
Yes.
That if the Warriors know there's a chance they don't get the 1 seed, so they don't want to come out and say.
And part of the story, if you get to Game 7, was you guys said you wanted to be the number 1 seed in February. You guys aren't the number 1 seed. Here we are at Game 7. Now you're playing on the road. What do you and you just avoid all that by right now. They haven't talked about it. I believe Draymond on the surface. If they haven't talked about it, but you can believe just because things you haven't talked about that they're not on your mind.
Well, and everyone focuses on Game 7 when it comes to home court. You know what I like to focus on? Games 1 and 2. Like, that matters. I understand Game 7 is the most important part, but being able to start off a series at home, being able to be obviously the big favorite when you're at home, and typically being able to start out a series with a lead in the series is very important.
Charles Barkley says role players play better at home than they do on the road. So it's not about the star players. It's about the other players who are able to play better in those first 2 games to get you momentum going into a long series.
And when we look at the bracket, there are teams that you could face as the 2 seed that you likely wouldn't face as the 1 seed that are not teams that anyone believes can beat the Warriors. But there might be teams that can take 1 game instead of 0 or 2 games instead of 1. Mm-hmm. If we look back to the year the Warriors blew the 3-1 lead against Cleveland, prior to that, Oklahoma City blew a 3-1 lead to them. Well, prior to that, what happened? The Thunder were in a brutal series with San Antonio. And you know what it looked like by the time they got to Game 6 and certainly Game 7 against Golden State? They were out of gas. The atrophy.
Accumulation of all these being under duress. The playoffs are totally different. Every possession is contested more. The stress that you are under. So over a month's period of time, if you could shorten that, that's why winning these series and closing them out becomes so important because of the cumulative effect that it's going to play in the rest of the season.
And the 2 years the Warriors have won championships, being the 1 seed has paid enormous dividends, not because of where Game 7 was, because they didn't play any Game 7s those years, but because of who they played, playing the lower seeds, and the type of team that was being trotted out against them. The year they won the title the first time, they didn't play a starting point guard the whole playoffs. Drew Holiday was out, then Mike Conley was out, then Patrick Beverley was out, then Kyrie Irving was out. That's different if you're the 2 seed up until you get to the NBA Finals. Last year, because of the 1 seed, they get Portland in the first round. Well, Nurkic was out. Because of the 1 seed, you get Utah in round 2. Well, guess what? Rudy Gobert was out. Then you face the 2 seed, by the way, San Antonio, which looked like they were neck and neck with you until Kawhi Leonard went out. And then obviously last year in the finals, they were better than Cleveland. But being the 1 seed, here's my thing. People say, well, Nick, you don't worry about the 1 seed with Cleveland. LeBron's only won 1 title as the 1 seed, and he's got 3 of them. I've seen LeBron repeatedly not be the 1 seed and be fine.
And because the question in the East is totally different. The question is, can LeBron win one of those first 2 games? And typically the answer is yes. We don't know. It's totally different because the level of competition and who LeBron James is. If LeBron was in the West, the seeding wouldn't matter as much as me because it would still be, can LeBron go there and win one of those games? I'll be like, yeah. So LeBron is the difference in trying to calculate these things.
And LeBron has experience of not being the top seed, of going on the road to start a series. Guess what? The Golden State Warriors in this run. You know how many series they've started on the road? 0. You know how many series they've gone into not as the 1 seed? 0. It's not to say they couldn't overcome it. Again, no matter what seed they go into the playoffs at, they will be the Vegas favorite. They will be the overwhelming Vegas favorite. And barring injury, they should be the Vegas favorite. But it would be unprecedented for this team to not be the 1 seed. In fact, it's unprecedented for this team to not have it all but wrapped up by this point in the year.
And Sarah, I know you like some good news for Golden State fans out there. They do have the best road record in the NBA by half game over Houston. So if they do have to go on the road, they are pretty good at that too.
And do you think it matters to Houston?
Oh, I think it matters enormously to Houston, personally.
Because to me, it's less about Golden State. I don't think it matters as much for them. I wonder how it impacts the
rumor
mindset
has it
of
James Harden likes Houston and kind of the festivities around Houston a little better than he likes the road.
Well, but don't you think from a mentality standpoint, CC, part of Houston believing they can go beat Golden State is going into the playoffs saying, we are the number 1 seed. They're going to have to come here.
I believe Houston is not setting itself up. I believe Houston believes they can go to Golden State and win too. I believe Houston has the right mind right now. We're going to try to get the number 1 seed, but man, we can go to Golden State and beat them. You don't want to set yourself up to think that it's like a blanket. Like I got to have this blanket with me. Then you end up, they're too close as far as the 1 and 2 seed to get consumed with playing at home.
I don't think they need it, but I think it would change their mentality entirely.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be different.
And people talk about, can you beat Golden State 4 out of 7? If you lose game 1, because you're on the road and you lose game 1, now you got to beat them 4 out of 6. And if you go down 2-0, even though another Barkley quote, series doesn't start till the road team wins. Well, that's great. But if the home team wins the first 2 and you're playing Golden State, now you got to beat them 4 out of 5. I think
the second quote he stole from someone else. The first one was an original.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Chuck.
So Chuck or whomever he stole it from said that.
Lonzo Ball has been out of the lineup since January 13th with a sprained MCL. Before the injury, he was showing some promising signs, averaging 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists over his last 15 games. He's expected to make his return Friday against the Mavs. Nick, how important is the rest of the season for Lonzo's future with the Lakers?
So that might sound hyperbolic even as a question. Like, what does the last 25 games mean for Lonzo's long-term future with the Lakers? But I think it's a totally fair and legitimate question because of the elephant in the room, which may be better stated as the potential king in the room and LeBron James's decision. Because what we know is this. Any team that Lonzo's on is going to have the additional distraction of the dad. Everything that swirls around it, whether it's questioning the coach, questioning his white teammates at UCLA, questioning Lonzo's future free agency, talking about the brothers coming there, all of that. Now, you will deal with that if Lonzo's a star, if Lonzo looks like he is going to turn into a star. But if Lonzo is just a good point guard in this league, point guard's as deep as it's ever been in NBA history right now. You've got guys like Jeff Teague's a good player. He's not one of the 20 best point guards in basketball. This is one of the reasons why Damian Lillard couldn't make All-Star games for so long, even though he's awesome. When you are trying to sell LeBron on Los Angeles this summer, man, if Lonzo does not play well down the stretch, and he had turned a corner over the last about 12, 15 games he had played, it would not surprise me if one of the prerequisites to LeBron and maybe Paul George or LeBron and Boogie Cousins coming there is we don't need this added distraction. Now, it's different if he's playing great. So that's why I think it is very important that Lonzo continues on the trajectory he was over the last dozen games before the injury.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the LeBron thing because what he's trying to accomplish, it doesn't change if LeBron or anyone else is trying to join the Lakers. We drafted him for a reason. Magic Johnson drafted him for a reason. And they expect in this time that he's missed, you mentioned January 13th since he's been out, they expect him to continue to develop as a player. That's what's really important. All the other things are going to take care of themselves. Well, they're going to take care of themselves. And if you don't develop as a player, not any player, but certain players might not want to join the Lakers. So for me, it's not all these other things. It's about I'm responsible for my own development. At the second half of the season, is he going to get better? All right? He played a window where he was bad. Then he had a window where he started to improve. Then he got hurt. Now, after that, let's see how he adjusts to the NBA that shouldn't be foreign to him. Let's see if he gets the rebound and throws the ball up the court 50 feet, which doesn't help in the NBA game. Does he start to push the ball? I don't think he's going to become more athletic. I don't think his shot is going to become any better. But there's certain things about the game as far as his rebounding. that are very, very good aspect. I'm worried about his shot selection and can he make guys around him better? Because that right there will determine a lot as far as his career. Not how good he shoots, or the guys around him, does he make them better? As Coach Mangini says, is he a force multiplier? Then I believe the Lakers organization, they're in good hands. But just worry about your development. Don't worry about who's going to be joining the team. Take this little window, 25 games, and try to work on my game, getting better, get myself in better position for my shots, knowing where I want to get on the court and where my teammates, where they want to get on the court.
Does he need to get a shot better, though? Like, the most disconcerting thing to me watching Lonzo, especially early on, his shot maybe improved incrementally later during that final stretch. He wasn't finishing at the like like Ben Simmons we could talk about, and he doesn't have the range on his shot. He can't shoot, but he can do so many things around the rim and the way that he can get to the basket, the physicality. Like Lonzo, to me, it's even when I'm expecting a guy that could do something at the rim, and he wasn't even able to do that.
Well, this is the thing. You would thought that a guy 6'5", he'd be more athletic, and he could play above the rim. Now, he did show some leaping ability on some alley-oops and things, but his overall athleticism is not on par with the guys that we see playing the position. So he is a good basketball player, more so than being a great athlete. And then I worry about also he had an MCL, so that hurts your lateral movement. How does that affect him on the defensive end? Because he was not a great defender when we saw him the first time.
And one of the reasons I think that he struggled finishing at the rim was because he wasn't trying to finish through contact. He was trying to avoid contact because the free throw shooting's been abysmal. Yeah. Like, it's the...
That does affect your finishing ability.
Absolutely. If you're saying, I'm either getting to the rim or getting fouled, then you're more likely to be successful than I'm either getting to the rim or avoiding a foul. Then all of a sudden, it's harder to finish those layups. I mean, there's no reason for him to be shooting 48% for the year from the free throw line. Like, that's, he was 67%, I believe, in college. You'd like your point guard to be closer to 77%, but 67% you can deal with. You can't deal with him shooting DeAndre Jordan's percentage from the free throw line. Like, that can't happen, and it affects other aspects of your game.
Cece, you brought up Magic Johnson, and obviously he comes in, president of operations for the Lakers. He sat there at the press conference pointing up to the banners saying, Lonzo, I expect you to be up. How much longer would he hold on to a player like Lonzo because of the expectations he set? Because this is one of his moves he made when first taking that position.
Well, it's his first move.
Right.
So I believe, which also is most important, not only because of the player and if it attracts other free agents, but also the distractions off the court. How is Magic Johnson going to handle the Lonzo Ball situation? And I believe it will tell a lot about Magic Johnson and his tenure with the Lakers. But from a contract standpoint, they're stuck with him. And number one reason why they're stuck with him, too, is because the dad. I mean, even as a top pick, you can't trade him today. Like, who would take him today?
Oh, well, that one I totally disagree with you on. If they wanted to sell low on Lonzo, there's plenty of teams that would say we're young teams. So
you're just saying they would have to give him away?
Well,
but who would give you a high first-round pick for him?
No, I don't think you'd get equal value.
Okay, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so the guy's
only played 50 games in the NBA, played less than 50. He's been in the NBA for 50 games. You know, so right now what I'm answering the question is they're stuck with him. They're not going to give up to him after a year or 2 years because they're stuck with him for at least that rookie contract.
And, by the way, I don't think anyone at this table is out on the possibility of Lonzo being an excellent player, of Lonzo justifying being the number 2 overall pick. And, again, it's a very small sample. But those last dozen games he played, all of a sudden the three-point percentage is 39%. All of a sudden he's giving you 14, 7, and 7. And you're like, okay, that is really what we were hoping to get. And he doesn't have to be a knockdown shooter. What he can't be is such a detriment that they don't even guard him out of the three-point line. Because if you are that's what Ben Simmons is, right? He has taken like 2 threes all year. You better be 6'10". You better be able to get to the rim and dunk on people.
Yeah, Ben's ability to handle the basketball is better in his matchups than Lonzo Ball has over the point guards. And his ability to get into the lane. And if he doesn't finish, he can create a shot for his team.
And when defenses hang off of him, he's got a head of steam. It's even tougher to stop. Here on First Things First, and we're joined now by former NFL head coach Eric Mangini. Coach, thanks for being
good
here.
To see you, brother. How are you?
Good morning.
I would reach across, but I don't know if that's only
It's
for
okay.
Nick.
It's okay.
It's cold and
The
flu
handshakes
season.
are only for Nick.
I got to get some Purell or something up
Sue
here.
told me to tell you that today. It's
Yeah,
cold and flu season.
get that.
Goodness. All that just for being gracious, just for being a gentleman,
Friendly.
welcoming a guest, cold and flu season.
Friendly Nick Wright.
We're thrilled to have you back again. All right, new Raiders head coach John Gruden says he's spoken to Marshawn Lynch and is counting on him. But Gruden doesn't want a repeat of last year when Lynch didn't seem to get into real shape until well into the season. Gruden said, quote, "I don't need this part-time Lynch. I need full-time Lynch." Of course, Marshawn is just one of the question marks in Oakland. Coach, how much of a challenge is Gruden facing after so much time away from the sidelines?
It's a huge challenge. And he stayed on top of the league when he was in broadcasting, but you get to study the league the way that you want to on your schedule. When you go back into the NFL, it's like running on a treadmill versus running a marathon. It is radically different. And he's in a position where he's the offensive coordinator, he's the head coach, he's a de facto GM because of the power that he's gotten. He's been given a $100 million contract, and we all know to whom much is given, much is expected. So he's going into all of those things are working, things he's going to have to work through. I think he does inherit a team that's pretty competitive. They need to do some work on defense, a lot of work on defense, but he does have a quarterback, so that's a positive part of this. But it's a dramatically different environment from a rule perspective that he's got to get used to that as well. There's so many variables here that he just hasn't been a part of for 8 years now that he's got to get back into.
Coach, I would say, and I need your opinion on this, in the last 8 years, there have been more rule changes as far as the game and the things that you can do off the field as far as salary cap, training, than any other time in NFL history.
Practice time, right?
Yeah, all these things. Like, there's been more changes in that 8 years than any other 8 years history of the NFL.
Yeah, and those changes are significant changes, especially the interactions that you can have with the players. And I remember even I was in Cleveland and then on TV, and then I went back to San Francisco, and the changes that had taken place just over that 2-year period were significant. And your ability to develop a relationship with the player in the offseason, to put in a new system. The Gruden grinders, it's hard to have a Gruden grinder because you're not allowed to grind in the offseason.
It's a very popular segment he used to do on Monday night.
Yeah, you may want that guy to be that way, and you may want him in working with the coaches, studying the playbook and getting a head start, but the rules...
You can't make him.
You can't. Well, it's not only that. They can't even if they want to. Everything is phased in, and it's slow, and by the time you get to OTAs, where in the past you could do significant amount of preparation with guys, you're just starting. You're starting where years ago you were building at that point.
How much for you? Because I think it's a good example for what we're talking about. From the 2 years at TV before you went back to San Francisco, how far behind did you feel when you first got to San Francisco, just from, forget the rule stuff, just from football perspective, just from knowing the players in the league? And you obviously were covering the league, just like John Gruden was, but I imagine can cover it much more closely when you're a head coach or when you're actually on a staff. So, like, how long did it take for you to feel you were fully caught up as if you hadn't taken that time?
Well, it took a little while. You've got to get in game shape, too. There were quite a few nights where I'm there at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, like, oh, my God, I forgot what this is like. It's because you control your environment when you're out. And in the league, you don't control your environment anymore. There are points that you have to hit every single day. In terms of knowing the players and that aspect of it, that's hard as well. You have a more superficial knowledge than you have when you're in it.
Now, Coach, I hit the Powerball. Nick and I, we've been trying, but we finally hit it. Okay. The first announcement, I make Nick my capologist. My second announcement, I make you the head coach.
And my first announcement is I remove Nick from your
I mean, you don't have that type of power.
You had a good run.
You don't get to make those decisions.
You can be special assistant to the head coach.
So, that leads to my question, and my question would be, give us 3 things that someone going from television into taking over an organization. Give me 3 things that you think are significant in trying to change or that you would do immediately.
In terms of him transitioning back?
Yes.
Well, I do like what he's talked about in terms of reaching out to the players. I think that's the most important thing that he can do. He may not be able to spend time going through the system, but the fact that he's reaching out to those guys, trying to get to know the players on the team, that's the first thing they have to do. And then you've got to really understand what the ability on the team is. You've got to spend a lot of time understanding where do we need to improve this team? How does my system, the things that I want to do, fit into the talent level that we have? And you asked a really good question, Nick, in terms of what changed. The run-pass options, that's now a staple in the NFL where it was being introduced when I was in Cleveland. So those are the 2 things. And then he's got to spend a ton of time with that staff, with that group, to make sure that there's a continuity of vision. So when those players come in, they're getting the best version of what that group has to offer.
Well, that last point is one that I want to spend some time on, because when I was trying to get Bill Belichick to go take over the Giants or leave the Patriots, go do something else.
How did those conversations go? Pretty good?
He wasn't swayed. But CeCe's biggest point was, you can't build a new staff. You can't get your whole program implemented. You just can't. He's built this whole thing in New England over almost 20 years. You just can't all of a sudden go somewhere else and implement it. Well, John Gruden is literally going somewhere else trying to implement something new. Obviously, they have coaches in place. It's not like when they fired Jack Del Rio, they fired everybody. But they're not his guys. And a lot of his guys are probably at this point either retired or they're out of the league or they're with other teams they don't want to leave. So how much of a disadvantage is that, and how do you overcome that?
That is a significant disadvantage, because one of the jobs as a head coach is to coach the coaches. You've got to consistently be developing them and making sure that they're giving you what you want. And when you don't have the shared experiences of previous staffs, I remember when I went to the Jets with Parcells, on that defense staff, it was Bill Belichick, it was Romeo Crennel, it was Al Groh, and I was the new guy. And they're referencing stuff that happened in 1985 for game planning. I'm like, look, fellas, I'd love to draw this up, but I was in grammar school. I was in 8th grade. So one of you is going to have to help me. But that value that he had of guys that knew what Bill wanted, what Bill Parcells wanted, it takes away a lot of pressure. Well,
and when you told a story, I believe it was on the air, about when you were with the team, I assume it was
on the air.
No, but when they hired Brian Dable. You were talking about, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it was for a very low-level job, correct? Yeah. It was one of the entry-level coaching positions.
Yep.
And you talked about how all the coaches are at the table. Everyone's drilling him. When you have the meat and potatoes of your staff in place, you can really zero in on the minor tweaks, right? But with something like this, you're not going to be able to have that attention to detail to your quality control coach, to your special teams assistant, right? Because you're basically building a new house instead of just adding a wing.
Well, when I took over as a head coach, I always wanted to do the rookie camp before I brought the veterans in. And I could have brought the veterans in earlier, but I wanted to make a bunch of mistakes as a staff with the rookies who didn't really know what it looked like in the NFL and didn't know we were making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of like
that'll kill your credibility with the veteran players.
Yeah, it's like a soft opening in a restaurant. I wanted to burn a few dishes, all the things that are going to go wrong. The rookies don't know. So we could go through that process and get to the point where when the vets came in, we were a well-oiled machine. But it takes time.
You mentioned how he's communicated, reaching out to the players, and with that being said, have players changed? Does he need to change or adjust his coaching style at all?
Well,
since he was coaching,
he'll be given a benefit of the doubt because of the way that he's been brought in and the power that he has in the organization. And I think guys know going into it what he's about, or I think they know going into it what he's about. But he's going to have to be able to win to back up the credibility that he has going in, because players are players. At the end of the day, they want to go to an organization that they can win, and they're willing to work as hard as they need to, as long as they know it's for giving them a chance to get a ring.
Quickly here, is there any additional hurdle he has because of the $100 million? If we know it, the players know it. Like, I know NFL coaches are highly paid, but he's going to be making more money than almost everyone on the team except for a few guys. Is that, in your eyes, would that be an additional hurdle? It's a good problem to have, as Marlo Stanfield would say. But I'm talking about when it comes to the players buying into his system. And when it comes to the players understanding him making some mistakes. Like when he's making $10 million a year, which is more than almost everyone on that team. Is there anything to that?
No, I don't think so. I think, if anything, that gives him more credibility.
Okay.
You may have to work through the tax
security.
law in California. It's 13% state tax. It'll be better for him in Nevada. But
Yeah, let me tell you something. If he call you to your office, you know one guy going to be there at the end of the day, and you better acquiesce to the guy that's going to be there with the $100 million contract.
yeah.
Coach Mangini back with us, and we're talking Andrew Luck. According to Ian Rappaport, the Colts quarterback is throwing weighted footballs and is full speed ahead for 2018. This, of course, after missing all of 2017. Coach, what are fair expectations for Luck in the Colts next season?
Just before you answer, just tell us real quick, when they say weighted footballs, they're not talking about just regular footballs. It's regular size football, size shape. It just weighs more like a medicine ball for basketball.
Yeah, you've probably seen it too with baseball, the weighted base. It's just same shape, same everything, just a little bit heavier.
Got it. Okay,
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know where that puts him in terms of his rehab. It's great that he's throwing the weighted footballs. You want to be able to throw footballs in OTAs. If he comes back, I would expect these guys to compete for the playoffs. And he's that much of a changer, a game changer for them. The Colts are in a great situation. They've got salary cap space. They've got a top end of the roster with guys that they can move on from if they want to without having dead money. So there's a lot of flexibility in this roster to improve it. Where they need to address some major problems is on defense. And they bring in Matt Eberflus. He's going to transition to a 43. They were in a significant amount of games last year. I know they only won 4, but there are a bunch that they lost late. With Andrew Luck, with an improved defense, with the resources they have available, to me, I see them competing for the playoffs next year if he's healthy.
And when we look at this division, we know Houston, the injuries they had, we believe they'll be much improved with Deshaun Watson coming back, taking over the quarterback, J.J. Watt returning from a significant injury. But they had 2 teams that made the playoffs out of this division in Jacksonville and Tennessee. So the opportunity is there in that division to get to double-digit wins. I like the fact that he's throwing a weighted ball compared to if they'd have said, oh, Andrew Luck is back in the weight room. That's totally different because they trust that his shoulder structure is sound enough that they would allow him to have the throwing motion and to try to get that joint and those muscles stronger. It's like Markelle Fultz with the 76ers. If he was shooting a weighted basketball right now, I would be more encouraged because that means that the muscles and the structure can handle the extra weight. So he's trying to develop muscle memory. Andrew Luck is doing the same thing. So I think it's more promising that he is throwing a weighted ball now compared to just being in the weight room.
The Fultz thing's really interesting because if you read the reports, what happened to him was he had an injury, tried to practice through the injury.
Of course.
And he, because of the injury, couldn't do his regular shot motion, and now he somehow seemingly can't do it anymore. If I'm reading this correctly, if Luck's shoulder, if there was any concern that it was still damaged to the point to where he couldn't have his regular throwing motion, they wouldn't want him to throw at all.
Right.
Because it could throw off the muscle memory, it could throw off the way he typically throws
And
the
it lets you know where the rehab stage, it's advanced enough that he's moved out of doing the small little things, grabbing things, push and pull stuff, that now he's actually working on the throwing motion and being repetitive with that motion. To me, that means that's a lot more promising diagnosis and an update on Andrew Luck than we've had in a long time.
I'd like to get an update on the medical staff and on the training staff and the people that made the decisions last year to the fact that he missed an entire season. It's the same situation as Miami. When you've got Ryan Tannehill and you decide not to do a surgery and then he goes out and you think he's going to be able to get through the season, he gets hurt in the preseason. There's a lot of points or parts of an organization that you have to evaluate. So have they made changes to the medical staff? Is it the same group that's giving them the feedback on Andrew now that was a year ago? Because it's hard to say with any kind of certainty that this is definitely moving in the right direction. We're hopeful, but
With a quarterback coming off an injury and a guy in Andrew Luck who, after the first 3 years where he played all 48 games in those 3 years, he only played 7 in year 4. He missed a game but was injured throughout year 5 and then obviously missed all of year 6. I think most people would say, okay, we have the number 3 overall pick. Who is the best offensive lineman? What's the best thing we can do to protect him? The other school of thought would be Andrew Luck's never had a dynamic running back, never had a truly game changer in the backfield. No disrespect to Frank Gore, who's had an amazing career. As you, team building wise, would you focus more on up front, or would you focus more on trying to help Andrew Luck out by giving him a guy where he can hand the ball off to if a guy such as Saquon Barkley were available?
I think if you have a solid running game, that helps a lot. But one of the things that Andrew Luck has to do is protect Andrew Luck. And you saw it with Peyton Manning. You see it with Tom Brady. Tom Brady will take some hits, but they're calculated risks. They're hits that he's taking to throw the ball 60, 70 yards on the field. There were times with Andrew Luck in watching him where he'd take hits to get a 5- and 6-yard completion, and it's just not good business. He's obviously smart enough to assess risk reward, and I love his toughness. I respect that aspect of it, but he's got to do a good job of protecting himself and know when to take chances, know when not to take chances.
Yeah, I was a Pro Bowl captain 3 seasons ago, and Andrew Luck was one of the first draft picks that we had. A brilliant passer of the football. Great to be around, a great leader. But you mentioned it. He's got to get better. He's got to get better at taking care of the ball. And that front office, forget the running game. They have to be able to protect Andrew Luck so that he can protect himself. Now, he is a great athlete, but he has realized, man, he can't even take the type of pounding that he has kind of subjected his body to. So I look for Andrew Luck to get back. Like, let's not forget who he is. He is a brilliant passer. He's very, very smart. The X's and O's, that part of the game. He is a very good teammate. They need to put the other things around him that I believe will make them a championship caliber organization. I believe that's up to Frank Wright to be able to change this organization. Get me some big people on defense. They're going to a 43 defense, so they need new personnel for that. And offensively, get some people in front of him, a lot like Philadelphia with that dominant offensive line that they had.
And what's nice about Frank Wright going there, and I know, obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about the different system with him versus Josh McDaniels, but this is a system that Andrew ran in college. He ran the West Coast system at Stanford, so he's got that familiarity. And we saw what they were able to do with Nick Foles, where they could get the ball out of his hands quickly. So as much as you want to improve the offensive line, which they need to address in the running game, and those things will help, and Andrew's decision-making, as a coordinator, as a head coach, you can also help him by giving him those quick reads, by forcing him to get the ball out quickly to limit the amount of times he can get hit.
And as far as the Colts aspect of this, Chris, you alluded to it. The AFC South for a long time was a punchline in this league. Like it was you rank the divisions, we know which division we're saying is last. It's the AFC South every year. They had not just two playoff teams. 2 of the last 8 teams standing in the NFL this year were in the AFC South. And that is with the team that a lot of people think is the most talented in the AFC South, Houston, not being a part of it. Tennessee did what they did with Marcus Mariota taking a step back when a lot of people believe in Mariota, think he's going to be even better. So that division all of a sudden could be sneaky competitive and could be a tough one even with a healthy Andrew Luck, which is all the more reason why the Colts, to have any chance to compete, need, for the first time in a few years, a healthy Andrew Luck.
Will be interesting to watch. Coach, thanks for being here.
Good to see you, bro.
Again.
Thank you so much.
Back here on First Things First, Danny Cannell joining us.
What up, Dan? What's going on, brother?
Good to see you guys. Thanks.
Welcome back.
Good
to
to be
see
here.
you.
Thanks.
Nice little tie bar. You got to.
Thank you. You know, represent Thursdays.
That's Thursday on his tie bar. If you can see
Your wife is doing that to you? Because I know your wife picks out all your stuff.
She does.
She's making you do that. See, that's what happens when you go to Florida State. They don't know the days. Hey, what day is it, bro?
Thankfully, my wife has good taste.
Thursday.
That's low. That's low.
You my man. Coming in hot.
I like it.
It is never too early to talk about the NFL draft, and that's where we're going. One player getting a lot of attention is Louisville's Lamar Jackson. He won the Heisman Trophy in 2016 as a quarterback, but according to reports, some NFL teams think he's a better prospect as a wide receiver. Danny, does Jackson have a brighter future at receiver or quarterback?
All right, who's the producer who floated this question? Because I'm going to have words with him after the show.
Oh, wow.
This is asinine that anybody would suggest that Lamar Jackson has a better chance to be a wide receiver than a quarterback in the NFL. My man is a quarterback, period. That is it. End of story. All you have to do is ask him. I asked him this question. I talked to him before the Heisman Trophy ceremony.
That's what I told you.
I asked him about this. I said, hey, have you considered playing another position? Have you considered playing wide receiver? You know what he told me? He said, no, man, I can't catch, which seems to be like it would be a problem. But this is a quarterback.
Great insight.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
From him, from the horse's mouth. You get it from him. He is not a wide receiver. I think Lamar Jackson is going to be the steal of the NFL draft because he's going to drop. And I don't love any of these quarterbacks. I like some of them. And I think the upside of Lamar Jackson, where you're going to be able to draft him, is going to be well worth it.
Danny, I'm worried about his throwing motion. I'm not going to get consumed with the completion percentage, but his overall throwing motion. He is not a pure thrower of the ball. He pushes the ball. So I wonder, just making those tight throws in those windows, those NFL windows. College, you're open like this. In the NFL, you need about that much room to be able to squeeze the ball in there, and trying to repeat that motion, I just don't see him being successful doing. I don't think he's a wide receiver because of what he said. I told Nick this a couple of days ago, that I'm not up for moving a guy to a position when he thinks and he's dreamt about this is the position I'm going to play, because I don't believe he will buy into the things that you have to do fundamentally to be able to play the position.
So, Chris, because we were talking about this before, and Chris had made the point that from a measurable standpoint, Chris understood why people would say this guy could be a good wide receiver. His change of direction speed, his height, his weight, these are things that would translate. But if the guy didn't want to play it, the guy doesn't want to play it.
Pro football is too hard to play anyway, let alone when you don't want to play the position that they're trying to make you play.
Well, so here's the thing, Danny. I'm just curious. Why do you think people want him to play wide receiver?
Well, I'll tell you why I think he's dropping in the draft. I mean, this is real talk, right? I think the reason he's dropped, and I don't think it has as much to do with race, is he struggles communicating. And it's a fact. He struggles communicating with interviews, when you talk to him, when you're in the press. And I think that scares off some general managers and some coaches in the NFL. And I think it's wrong, and I think it's the NFL wants their franchise quarterbacks to look and sound a certain way. And the reason I don't think it's about race as much is because E.J. Manuel was drafted 16th overall, and he didn't show you half as much on film or potential-wise as Lamar Jackson. But when you talk to him, he sounded like the CEO of your company.
And he looks like the CEO.
And he looks like the CEO of a company.
So and that is something people make the mistake on quite often, which is sometimes people misconstrue intelligence and eloquence. There are very smart people who do not communicate great, and there are very dumb people who can speak the King's English. Like that. Now, where race is inextricably tied to that is we tend to give the benefit of the doubt to some people and not the benefit of the doubt to others. I've been very upset. I have become more of a Lamar Jackson fan due to how he has been discussed amongst the supposed draft experts, because I feel so much of it is code. I listen to the preeminent draft expert. I'm not trying to throw shots, but it's the reality. Mel Kiper Jr., when he's asked about Josh Allen, the 6'5" prototypical white stand-in-the-pocket passer, when he's asked about his 54% completion percentage, his quote on the conference call was, "Stats are for losers." When he is then asked about why he has Lamar Jackson as a wide receiver, his quote is, 57% completion concerns me. Like and we do see this. No one is suggesting, as Deontay, one of our producers, said before the show, Josh Allen maybe should be a tight end. You know what? I think he's got the size and we only tend to say the guys who should change position is the black quarterback. Now, the eloquence thing is interesting because people do expect your quarterback to be able to communicate well, and that is important. But I just think there is some code going along with the discussion of Lamar Jackson.
Danny, who does Lamar Jackson remind you of?
So early on when I was watching him last year when he won the Heisman Trophy, I thought he was Michael Vick 2.0. And Mike Vick struggled with accuracy his entire career. I think he had one season over 60%. He was around a 59, 58% completion guy, but he was an electric runner. And I think Lamar Jackson brings that skill set to the table. He's not just a mobile quarterback. He is a dynamic difference maker. That's why I feel like if you get him with a coach that will utilize that skill set, I think you could have a tremendous amount of success with him. I think he's similar to RG3 as a runner, but with that style of play comes the risks of injury. And I think if you are a coach, you have to teach him, instill in him the ability to protect himself. Now, he hasn't been hurt. RG3 had a history at Baylor with injuries, tore his ACL a couple times. He had issues. Lamar Jackson does not. Like, I think he can withstand the beating that he would have to take playing 16 games. And I think there is a tremendous amount of upside. If you put him on a team that's not very good, he can make some plays for them, much that's not like anybody else. Maybe Baker Mayfield, but Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, they go to a bad team, they're going to get exposed because they only have one phase of their game, where Lamar Jackson can get in there and make some plays for you.
One thing from a communication standpoint, and this what made me think about this because I haven't heard that angle yet. I do know it's real because part of being an NFL quarterback, one thing is image. What does the guy look like? The other thing is, what does he sound like to the public? But more importantly, what does he sound like to his teammates? Brad Johnson. You know Big Brad. Brad was a backup at Florida State. The Vikings drafted him. We got Brad. Brad's from, I think, Black Mountain, North Carolina.
Yep.
Brad has a little twang or a little on his diction.
Yeah.
And Brad is not an imposing, take charge guy. But he was a good leader. It took him some time to be able to understand the NFL locker room and not be overwhelmed and be comfortable with the way he talked and that he was a more reserved guy. Brad went on to become a great leader, led his team to Super Bowls. Man, we had plenty of success playing with Brad, but they gave Brad time to develop that diction and the command of the locker room that he wasn't forced into it. Why isn't Lamar given the same opportunity? Brad Johnson was no great prospect, but he ended up having a great NFL career because people had patience. And why won't people be patient with Lamar Jackson?
They should be. That's why I think he's going to be the steal, because I do think unfortunately, I do think he's going to drop. He's played under Bobby Petrino, who puts a lot of pressure on his quarterback. It's about football IQ. You don't have to talk to him. You have to watch him play because he excels in that system. I think mechanically he can do some things to get better that will help him where the ball doesn't sail on him. But I do think he throws fairly effortlessly. I don't think there's a struggle to throw the football. I think he has some natural arm talent. If you can reel that in and get him a little bit more accurate, which I think he can develop, then I think he could be a project that would be worth the risk in the second round.
Maybe if I close my eyes, it's Phillip Rivers because he doesn't have a pretty motion.
No, it's awful.
But just being effective. He pushes the ball also. Just repetition. That's what you believe potentially he could be like. Okay.
Can you imagine Phillip Rivers if he could run around the way Lamar Jackson could? Like, it'd be close to unstoppable. Again, 0 red flags. He's been a model student athlete. He's been great. And we never talk about that. He's a leader. He's won games. And he actually had a better season this year than he did his Heisman Trophy winning season, but he didn't have as much talent around him, which is what you're going to have in the NFL. No matter where you go, you're going to have to lift up the play of the players around you, and I think Lamar Jackson will bring that to the table.
Is there a team where you see him fitting in well?
It depends on the system that he's given. It really does. In a tailor-made system for him. And I have to give that some thought.
And listen, there is no, I know it seems like this, there is no rule that your backup quarterback can't be the mobile, dynamic athlete that typically is the black guy.
Right.
Like, we got a lot of, you know what I feel we have, true or at least close to equality in the NFL? When there's a lot of bad black backup quarterbacks, because there's a ton of bad white backup quarterbacks. Right. There's a ton of them. We don't have a lot of opportunities to see that, and because a lot of these guys get told, change this position, go try that, and so I'm rooting for the guy.
Sarah, I got 2 for you. I blanked on them. Kansas City or Philly? Run that Andy Reid style system where they're implementing more
be the
college
third guy
schemes.
in Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be great. Yeah, and you can utilize him situationally too.
I like it. Suit ain't bad either.
Thank you.
This pattern is sharp. Danny, we're going to have you stick around and ask, is Baker Mayfield better than Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen? That's next on First Things First.
Hey, everybody, Nick Wright here, and thank you so much for listening to the First Things First podcast. But I wanted to tell you about another podcast at Fox Sports that we are so excited about, and that is Alexi Lalas's State of the Union podcast. That's right, U.S. soccer legend Alexi Lalas will be partnering up with Fox soccer guru and researcher extraordinaire David Moss to review the top storylines in soccer across the globe. Each week, Alexi will give his State of the Union on American soccer as it rebuilds for the future. Subscribe and listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Now back to the show.
Danny Cannell back with us on First Things First. Let's talk NFL draft quarterbacks. Joel Klatt put out his mock draft at foxsports.com. He has Sam Darnold going number 1 to the Browns, Baker Mayfield going at number 5 to the Broncos, and UCLA's Josh Rosen going 6th overall to the Jets. Danny, which quarterback do you think will be the best in the NFL?
All right, so I don't love any of these quarterbacks, right? We talked about that with Lamar Jackson. That's why I kind of like him at a lower spot. I think more so than ever in the last probably decade, where a quarterback gets selected is going to matter more than most years. Absolutely. And it's that case for every quarterback, but even more so with this group. So I feel like they all have little red flags or little issues that they need help around them. So if I'm looking at Joel Klatt's mock draft right there, I'm loving Baker Mayfield to Denver at 5. Like, I think that is a home run. But I also love Baker Mayfield as compared to this class. I think we're doing the same thing we did last year with Deshaun Watson when we saw Mitch Trubisky and Patrick Mahomes selected before Deshaun Watson. I think we're looking at him, we're trying to say, well, is he a product of the system? It's just stats. He's just putting up obnoxious stats, but how is it going to be in the NFL? This guy is a winner. He's won at every phase of his game, high school, college, and I think that carries over. I love the chip on the shoulder. I love his decision-making on the field. He does not turn the ball over. Again, you put him in the right system, he is going to flourish in the NFL. Top-tier arm talent, pinpoint accuracy. He's got the most important skill set.
And sometimes I think the quarterback wins stat can be overrated. But why did Oklahoma win those games? Because Baker Mayfield was the best player on the field. Very similar to Clemson. Now, Clemson had great defense. They had great skill position players. But they had the best player on the field in Deshaun Watson. So It's one thing to be part of a winning culture, to be part of a winning program. It's another thing to be the predominant reason your team is winning high leverage, big playoff type games, championship type games, as Deshaun Watson was, as Baker Mayfield was.
I think that Andrew Luck, the conversation at this point, Andrew Luck's career, it validates the point that you make as far as right now, it's more important to be with a team that supports you and the supporting cast from an organization standpoint, from a talent standpoint, from a resources they're going to commit to running game and offensive line in front of you. The reason why we've seen some of our recent quarterbacks, the Rams, Jared Goff, their investment in that offensive line, getting Whitworth, getting Todd Gurley squared away. The reason why they were successful. Let's look at Carson Wentz in Philadelphia. Dominant offensive line, dominant left tackle, dominant right tackle, 3 running backs. So you are right. When you're looking at these guys, you better start, before you can answer the question, who's going to be the most successful, we need to determine where they're going to go and what type of support. The Denver Broncos, for 40 years, have supported their team. They've been a great organization. Like, they are one of the marquee franchises. So Baker going there, that would be a great get for them, and it would be better for his career.
Do you want the Danny Cannell mock draft?
Yes.
Because I got the plan.
I was about to ask.
I'm going to fix Cleveland's problems, okay?
Hold on.
I'm fixing their quarterback problems.
Don't do it, Danny.
I'm taking Saquon Barkley at 1. All those quarterbacks you mentioned with the good offensive lines around them, what else do they have? Dynamic running game. You left out another one, Dak Prescott with Ezekiel Elliott, dynamic, and their offense was close to unstoppable. Saquon Barkley at 1. If you can trade down a little bit and still get Baker Mayfield, I would take him, but I would not shy away from taking Baker Mayfield at 4. Put Saquon Barkley and Baker Mayfield in your backfield and tailor-make your offense with those 2 guys back there and say, good luck stopping us.
See, I want Cleveland to draft a quarterback at 1 and a quarterback at 4 so they can actually get the thing right.
I wouldn't be opposed to taking
And by the way, people say it's crazy. We see teams every year trade multiple first-round picks to go get a quarterback, but we don't have to get into that right now. Here's the thing I want to ask you, though.
They did with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. Same thing. Take the quarterback.
So let's talk about the California quarterbacks for a moment. Cris is more partial to Sam Darnold. I'm more partial to Josh Rosen. Both of these guys have played in warm weather their entire careers, whether it was high school or college.
Fort Lauderdale. All right?
And we saw evidence of how
went
that
to the
panned out.
academy, went to Florida State. How did that win in the hands?
Exactly. Not very good.
Well, so two things. One is talk to us about how real it is going from playing in nice weather, perfect circumstances to whether it's Cleveland or New York with the Jets or New York with the Giants, a lot of these, Denver even. That, and of those two California quarterbacks, Rosen and Darnold, who do you think is the better NFL player?
So as far as going from warm weather to cold weather, I think it's individual. Some guys will be able to respond to it. Now you can actually throw with gloves on. I mean, the benches are heated nowadays. And as far as any college program that you play, you're going to be done by Thanksgiving for the most part. And then you're going to play in a warm weather, bowl game. So you're not getting that much of a test. Even if you're at Michigan or Ohio State, it's still not that cold.
Yeah, 2 or 3
relatively.
games.
Right. And you're in the NFL, you're putting your back half of your season is going to be much colder. So I think that's overblown a little bit. But you definitely want to try to figure that out. That's why I think hand size comes into play. And as much as I hate the underwear Olympics that we call the combine, some of the stuff does matter. You want guys to have a certain hand size so they can grip the ball in cold weather. For these two quarterbacks, again, not in love with either one of them for different reasons. With Sam Darnold, I think you've seen inconsistency. I didn't love the way he handled, and it was a ton of pressure and stress on him, but I thought it impacted his play. If on the field at USC this year, especially early in the season, if you take him at number 1 for the Cleveland Browns, there will be more stress and pressure than anything compared to what he had in this past offseason coming into his last season at USC. With Josh Rosen, I know you like him. He scares me because of the intangibles off the field stuff. I love when I watch him on film. I love what I see from him from a quarterback standpoint, pure pocket passer, really natural arm talent, arm motion. But I'm scared of what he does in a locker room, handling media, being outspoken politically. That scares me from what you want your franchise quarterback to be.
And I love it. That's probably, to be totally honest, it's probably one of the reasons I like him as much as I do. So, I mean, that's just different taste.
I almost feel like he falls in the line of Jeff George, Jay Cutler, Josh Rosen. Incredibly talented, but is he a guy that has the players gravitate toward him and want to go to battle with him and will win games for him and all these types of things that make great NFL quarterbacks great? I don't know if Josh Rosen has those assets.
Right. One of the next important, Dan, let me see your hand. Let me see this hand right here.
Yeah.
All right, you see that?
Oh, man.
Okay, now you see that? If those kids, you see that at the combine. Now, you see that?
Yeah.
All right?
Maybe
now,
that's why I couldn't throw at the metal.
all right, now, if I'm the Cleveland Browns and one of the kids have a hand like Chris Carter, that's about 10 3/4 from the pinky.
Because you have a big hand.
Engulfed.
Yeah.
Okay, like that right there makes a difference, and that's the difference between Troy Aikman, Brett Favre, and some of these other guys. Their hand size. That will determine, too, if they can throw the ball in the cold.
Can I ask one question about Rosen? You guys tell me if it's unfair. Is it unfair that when I look at him and I say you're a 22-year-old, peak of your athleticism college athlete, that he doesn't look like he is in the most amazing shape I've ever seen? That he has a little of the Ben Roethlisberger face, and Roethlisberger at a 35-year-old NFL quarterback established, that's one thing. I look at Baker Mayfield. The guy looks like he's cut out of granite. Josh Rosen's a thin guy. He's not super muscular, but is that unfair?
Well, what I think is not unfair is, does that influence his ability to stay healthy? Because he has struggled with injuries,
right?
Whether it was concussions or other issues, when he had shoulder issues, other more hand issue this past season. That would concern me, because part of the evaluation process, when you're looking at all these guys, is can they survive 16 games in the NFL? And it's not an easy question to answer.
Right, and can he do like Jared Goff did? All right, got banged around his first year, but second year, he started understanding the game. He was bing, bing, bing. He's letting the ball go, and he's a pure passer of the football. You can become that, but you have to understand that you're not going to make a living by holding on to the football and taking on these people by your physical presence. You're going to have to be able to get rid of the football, but he does have to get bigger, because the wear and tear, eventually it wins out in the NFL.
Would you take him in New York City?
Who's the him?
Josh Rosen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think listen, you guys, and young guys like the outspoken, politically active, thoughtful guy. Like, I think guys are more apt to follow that than they were in the past. I think the younger generation of players is less determined that you have to just be football. And you said Jeff George, Jay Cutler. I'm not sure Jay Cutler knows who the president is, much less to have a lot of opinions.
I meant from a leadership in the locker room, not politically, outspoken.
No, of course.
I just meant from a locker room perspective.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.